Thanks for staying with us. Now, it seems the country's electricity troubles won't be going away anytime soon. Stage 3 power cuts are currently underway until 10 p.m. this evening. The power utility says demand is higher than anticipated and some units have tripped. To discuss this continuing problem, we are joined now by Wits University Professor Thokozani Majozi. He's also the chairman of the board of the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, as well as the executive dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Built Environments at Wits University. Thank you so much for your time, Prof. Many titles there, but I think let's just try and focus on the issue of load shedding. I think South Africans are really fed up and cannot take load shedding anymore, and we are constantly told by Eskom management that this is going to be with us for some time. What do you think, from your assessment, is the actual problem here?
Well, Heidi, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk about some of the work that we are doing on various fronts in as far as energy is concerned. But the long and short of it, Heidi, the problem that we have at the moment is really about availability of supply. It is not necessarily about the installed load, which I think would have been a more serious problem. So in terms of the installed capacity in South Africa, we have enough to supply the whole country, but the availability of the power plants, for a number of reasons, has been reduced to very, very low levels. As you know, the issues here that come up would be the availability of generators, sabotage, and a number of other things that would perhaps pertain to poor maintenance and design issues. So really, what we have to put our minds on is how to increase availability of the operations, particularly at power generation level. That is really the nub of it.
I want us to speak about how many power stations we have in this country and whether or not that is also a problem, because previously, when the media was given a tour together with Scopa at Medupi and Kusile power stations, what came out and what seems to be a big problem is that we have power stations, but instead of them being built within, say, 5 to 7 years, it's taking 15 to 17 years, and we're not building enough power stations, which is going to become a problem in the long term. What is your assessment of that? Do we need more power stations? Will this alleviate the problem?
Right. I think I'm glad you asked that, Heidi. The issue of availability of power or energy, and particularly electricity, is not a one-sided issue. In most instances, when we talk about electricity availability, we look at the supply side in most instances. For example, the question that you've asked, how many power stations we need to build, how many we have in the country. In terms of what we have right now, we have enough power stations at the moment for the country. The problem is that even what we have is not functioning at its design capacity, which is really what I talked about early on, which is availability of the plant operations. When we design a chemical plant, or when we design a power plant, or any operation, its availability features as one of the key parameters in terms of performance. And in this case, our availability is very low. That is the issue. In most instances, we focus more on the supply side, but there's another side which I think we have not really focused on. It has not featured highly in our conversations, and that is really on the demand side. For example, the industrial sector in South Africa consumes in excess of about, say, 60% of our electricity in the country. We have not begun asking a very fundamental question of whether that electricity is used efficiently or not in industries. And it is there that the work that I do on a regular basis, which is really on the optimization of chemical plants, comes in handy, because what we do in that instance, we look at how these operations could be designed in such a way that per ton of production that they produce, they use the least amount of power. Or in the case of the power plants, because the work that we do also applies in the design of new power plants, we look at how can we design this plant such that per kilowatt hour that is produced, you use the least amount of, say, for example, coal or something like that. Yeah. So that is the issue that we have not focused on very, very closely. How do we design plants that are efficient in the use of energy? How do we make sure that the major users of energy use that energy efficiently? Even if it can so happen, for whatever reason, that tomorrow we wake up and Eskom is functioning at its optimal capacity, for as long as our economy continues to grow, and the major users of energy use energy inefficiently, we will still arrive at problems. No matter how much Eskom grows, if the manner in which the energy is used is inefficient, we will still run into problems. And I think if we really are serious about getting a full solution to the problem of availability of electricity, it should not just be about the supply. It must also be about the demand, and mainly about how those who use the most energy use it efficiently.
Don't give me such bad news, Prof. I just want somebody to tell me, don't worry, load shedding will end this year or next year, the latest. It becomes highly problematic because it affects every single part of everyone's lives, the economy, crime. It becomes highly problematic. Let's just end off with perhaps your thoughts on renewable energy. Everybody would say South Africa is so blessed because we have more sun than almost any other country. We have sun even in winter, and we're not utilizing that or using it. And it goes back to the question of, many would say it's almost as though our government in this country doesn't want us to have increased availability and enough access to electricity, and we're not using renewable energy like our sun or even our wind.
No, actually, Heidi, the opposite is true. The intake of renewables is increasing quite steadily. And I must say that renewables, despite the fact that they have been promoted as the panacea to some of the problems that we have, the truth is different. There is no energy resource at the moment, and I'll just mention the three that feature very highly in our conversations. The renewables that you've just mentioned now, the fossil fuels, which of course have some total onslaught on the environment, as well as nuclear. These three always feature very highly when we talk. None of them has all the solutions to our problem. What we are actually looking for, Heidi, is an energy resource that can do three things at the same time. It must be sustainable in terms of environment. Unfortunately, the fossil fuels are not in that league. It must be available at all times when we need it. In other words, there should be no intermittency. Unfortunately, renewables don't tick that box. And it must be cheap at all times, meaning that it must be accessible to everyone and not just the few. And most of the energy resources we have now have closed that gap. So in terms of cost, we seem to be okay. But there are two boxes that none of all these of all these energy resources can tick. So renewables are good, and I'm seeing a lot of improvement, even in terms of cost, even in terms of storage. So that intermittency problem, for example, that still exists, in the next few years, it might be gone. But right now, we still have an issue with intermittency when it comes to renewables. So all these sources of energy have a role to play, and the question is, to what extent? So we have to have a motley of energy resources, and the question is, in that mix, how much do you have as coal or gas or oil? How much do you have as your renewables? And how much of that do you have, for example, as nuclear? That's the question that we ought to ask.
Certainly, and I hope that the powers that be are having this discussion, because this load shedding just cannot continue. I'm telling you, Prof, it makes me so angry. The minute we see those notices from Eskom, I just get so upset because it just affects everybody. But thank you so much for your insights. We really do appreciate it. That's Professor Thokozani Majozi from the University of Wits.